Bum, 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 bum. It's Bumblebee. My mom and I were out shopping yesterday, and we found some stuffed animals for Brenda that don't squeak, so they can be played with in the background until she drops them on the floor. We got her this, and a penguin that has a stuffed carrot for whatever reason. So Brenda has some new toys. Think of them as belated Christmas presents. And they were cheap, so it doesn't matter if she shreds them or not. She seems to like them, so that's good. Okay. Time for my last Dressrosa Royals video. So I do still have to do Moscherie and her father in regards to the Tontada Kingdom. But that is technically a separate one because they are related to Greenbit is where they live as opposed to Dressrosa. So, as I said, thing falls in the background a lot. You're the one that keeps dropping it. That's not my problem. I can make it your problem. I know you can, pretty girl. Pretty girl, pretty girl. Love the Brenda baby. But this one is going to be about the last Dressrosa Royal that I have yet to talk about yet. And that is going to be Rebecca, who is, of course, the daughter of Scarlet and Kyros, the niece of Viola, and the granddaughter of King Riku-Dole III. She is kind of the former crown princess of Dressrosa, and she forfeited that title so she could go and live with Kyros, because that's what she always wanted. And she is currently the lady-in-waiting for Viola. So, a lot of the stuff about Rebecca I have subsequently talked about in other videos in regards to interactions she's had with her grandfather and her aunt, and in regards to her reactions with Kyros when I discussed him. But there's also chunks of Rebecca's story that I have not really gotten to talk about that much. Because none of those other characters are there at that moment. So mostly stuff about, during the Battle Coliseum and everything like that. Or during the, Cordia Coliseum competition and everything like that. So, into some basic things about Rebecca. She is 16 years old, and she is one of the few princess characters that actually has kind of like a title that goes along with her, or like an epitaph. And in her case, it is the Undefeated Woman and the Phantom Princess. Phantom Menace reference, anybody? I don't know. Depends on where you stand for Star Wars. So today's video will be about Rebecca, and then my next one I think is going to be about Moscherie and her father, because they're just in the Tontada Kingdom, and that's possibly just going to be combined into one video, but I have to see where all of that information lands. So there's not too much to talk about in regards to Rebecca, in regards to like her personality, because she is, this fairly optimistic person for the most part. Yes, there are moments where she gets very depressed, which is perfectly understandable. She's, her mother has died. She did not know she had a father for about 10 years of her life. She's had so many other horrible things happen to her. She's been trapped in the Cordia Coliseum for several years up to this point in time, and has had to fight and fight and fight in order to somewhat survive. She goes through so many different things. So, there's a lot there, and I'll be touching on a lot of that throughout the course of this video. So, kind of in regards to her history or her backstory to a degree, is that Rebecca is the only daughter, or the only child, of Scarlet, who is the former crown princess of the Dressrosa Kingdom, and Kyros, who is one of the former captains of the Royal Army. He is also this legendary gladiator who had been at the Coliseum and won, I believe it was 3,000 matches and was undefeated. She's trying to look outside. There's nothing but snow out there. It's all just snow and cold right now, baby girl. Trust me. Snow and cold. Oh, God. It's been so cold the last couple of days, almost the last week at this point in time, but yep, Okay, back to this. Sorry. The cold dragged me in. And I still have to go out and shovel more later. Well, if I was on, well, no, they do get snow on Dressrosa because we do see snow in Viola's flash, or in Rebecca's flashback, so that's not really wrong. Are you leaving because I'm ignoring you? Okay. But so going into what happens is, as I said, Rebecca's parents are Scarlet, former princess of Dressrosa, Kiros, who is the former captain of the guard or head of the royal army, however that shakes down. And they fell in love, but because of his past as a criminal, her father didn't think that the rest of the country and the rest of the world, in regards to other royals, would be accepting of this for someone who would be marrying the future queen of the country. So, as I mentioned in Kiros's video and Scarlet's video and other videos, pretty much all of them, minus Doflamingo's, what happens is they fake Scarlet's death, and she goes off with Kiros to go and live in this very nice little cottage in the flower fields, and pretty much everybody knows that's where they live, because I'm sorry, she didn't change her appearance at all. She doesn't like cut her hair and dye it or anything like that. She looks the exact same. And like, if the people aren't smart enough to figure out that this woman who looks exactly like their princess and has the same name as their princess, you know, blah 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 blah. But so they live there and they end up having a daughter, and you know, Rebecca is just adored by her parents and by her grandparents and by her aunt and by like the other couple of guards, like Tank and some of the other guards that know where they live and come and visit them and everything like that, because you know, Riku and his wife, who we still never have a name of, and you know, Viola come and visit quite a bit in regards to, you know, seeing Rebecca and, you know, watching her grow up and everything like that. They're there for a good chunks of it. So it's not like she is like abandoned by that side of her family, and then Kiros is an orphan, so there's nothing from that side of the family to go with. So there's a lot of stuff going on with that. And for the first 6 years of Rebecca's life, things are pretty good. She has her mother, she has her father, she has her, you know, grandparents and aunt that come and visit. She, I don't believe, is aware of the fact that she is technically a princess or that she has this royal connection. She doesn't know that. But so, yeah, she is very well taken care of. Her parents adore her, but one of the things in regards to her relationship with her father at this point in time is that Kiros, as much as he loves her, he cannot bring himself to actually touch her with his bare hands. And he ends up, you know, wearing gloves anytime that he holds her or anytime that he's playing with her, because he views himself as being tainted by the fact that he has all of this blood on his hands from times in the Colosseum when he would fight. I don't believe he ever actually killed his opponents while he was fighting, because those were not the rules of the Colosseum. It was at that point in time that would not have been the rule of the Colosseum. It was, you know, fight to the death or whatever. But so, because that would, you know, not, because I don't think Riku would have gone for that. But you know, Kiros had, you know, that blood on his hands in that case from fighting people, and then also he had killed a man at one point in time, and he was, you know, he still feels very guilty about that, and he doesn't want any of that type of stuff to touch his daughter. He doesn't want to get any of the metaphorical blood on his hands onto his sweet little innocent daughter. And Rebecca, Scarlet doesn't really like that. She's like, that is not the way this works. Stop acting like that and hug your daughter. And hold your daughter and everything like that. So she doesn't buy that by any means. And so, yeah, for the first 6 years of Rebecca's life, things are pretty good. Then we have the Night of Terror, as I keep referring to it. And during the Night of Terror, Rebecca and her parents go outside and they see that the capital, you know, around the King's Plateau is like on fire, and that there's smoke and other, you know, it does not look good. So Kyros is like, okay, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna go down there and I'm gonna see what's going on. And he gets into his armor and he heads down, and he tells Rebecca and Scarlet that they need to go to that they just kind of need to wait for him to return, and once he returns, he will tell them what he found out and what's going on in the capital and everything like that. So he goes off, and then during that time frame, Kyros gets turned into the Thunder Soldier by, Sugar, and Rebecca and her mother both completely forget about him. So they don't remember that they are waiting for him to show up. And they are waiting to get this information from him. They know something is happening, but they don't know exactly what. And it's basically this heart-wrenching thing with the fact that, like, every single memory that has Kyros in it is just, Kyros is just gone. There's nothing, no indication that Kyros was there at all. And, like, obviously Rebecca is the proof that Kyros existed, but, like, Rebecca and Scarlet just like, nope, who's Kyros? I don't know who that is. So, which is just heart-wrenching and kind of reminds me of some of the stuff in Doctor Who, with the 11th Doctor, with the first season with Amy and Rory, where Rory gets kind of like erased from existence, and then the Doctor is trying to figure out how he can get Amy to remember Rory, and everything like that. So there's like that connection there a little bit, and it's both has redheads involved. And Kyros is kind of dressed as a centurion, and Rory kind of becomes a centurion. So there's kind of like this connection there a little bit. I don't think it's intentional by any means, because the thing with Kyros is that, like, his story as the Thunder Soldier is based off of the Steadfast Tin Soldier fairy tale by Hans Christian Andersen. But what ends up happening is, of course, during this time frame, the kingdom is being attacked between Doflamingo manipulating Kyros and his guards into attacking the civilians, and then just like sending out Diamante to go and try to kill Rebecca and Scarlet anyway, because there are these remnants of a royal line that could cause Doflamingo problems in the future. Technically not wrong. But what ends up happening is, of course, during this time frame, Rebecca and her mother stay in hiding in the flower fields, and Rebecca gets hungry, so her mother tells her to stay in the flower fields, and Scarlet goes into town to get food. While in town, she runs into Diamante, who shoots her. And, well, there's like two things that happen here. So there's one where first it's Rebecca and Scarlet trying to escape, and they run into Diamante, and the Thunder Soldier shows up, manages to, kind of give them enough time as a distraction to allow them to escape. And then it's Scarlet goes back and tries to get food for Rebecca, because Rebecca's hungry, and she runs into Diamante again, and then she gets shot. And of course, I went over everything with, like, from Kyros and Rebecca's, Scarlet's perspective in this regard. For Kyros is there for when this happens, and she asks him to take this food to her daughter, which of course Kyros agrees to. The Thunder Soldier agrees to, because it's his daughter too. And he, carries Scarlet back to where Rebecca is, and he has the food, and they bury Rebecca. And Rebecca gets angry at him and everything like that. Rightfully so. She's like a 6-year-old that doesn't understand what's going on entirely. And then he ends up, they bury Scarlet. And then he ends up, at this point in time, Kyros has figured out that, okay, they don't know who I am. They've forgotten about me. So it has to do something with me being turned into a toy. So he's like, okay, well, I made a promise to your mother that I'm going to look after you from now on. And she's like, but I don't want you to look after me. But he kind of convinces her and everything like that by, like, acting like a silly toy, which is something that regular Kyros probably wouldn't do. So he makes her happier and everything like that, and makes her laugh, and he can, gets her to the point where she will eat the food that Scarlet got for her. And from that point on, Kyros, as the Thunder Soldier, takes care of Rebecca. And he ends up, we see during the flashbacks that he works on making enough money so he can get her a little house so she can live in the little house. And he gets, works so many different jobs to be able to afford food for her. He tries his best to give her at least birthdays when he can, to celebrate those so she can at least have some message, some remnants of a normal childhood of happiness and everything like that. And he cares for her. He beats up on bullies if they start, hurting her and everything like that. And at one point in time, there is a moment where Rebecca is kidnapped. And Kyros, as a Thunder Soldier, goes and he manages to save her. But from that point onward, he realizes that, okay, I need to train her to be able to defend herself, because I'm not going to be there I can't be there for her all the time. And she needs to at least be able to defend herself. Which for Rebecca, Rebecca very much has like Scarlett's want to be a pacifist, which again, as I've stated before, I understand. I myself fall under the pacifist idea. But I also understand the concept of like being able to defend herself, which being able to defend yourself should the need arise. And that's what ends up happening, is that while they are training, Rebecca kind of complains, and the Thunder Soldier points out that, okay, I cannot be around you all the time and able to protect you all of the time. And I understand that, like your mother, you do not want to, hurt people, but there is a difference between hurting people in cold blood and protecting yourself. And when it comes to me, referring to himself, he's like, I am a toy. I rust and my joints rust, and I am getting older, and it makes it harder for me to be able to fight. So that means that it's harder for me to be able to protect you. So you at least have to be able to protect yourself in case I'm not around, and it gives me time to get to you so I can protect you. Which I know in a lot of cases, I don't know exactly how often this takes place, but I'm sure in certain countries and stuff like that, where even, it is necessarily frowned upon for women to be able to fight, it's at least somewhat decided that they should at least be able to, like, somewhat defend themselves, maybe not to the point where they can, like, wield a sword, but, like, they have, like, a hidden dagger or something like that they can use to protect themselves if necessary and keep them safe until help comes. And then there are other countries where, like Native American countries or Native American cultures and Norse cultures and even South American cultures, where there were lots of those types of societies where it was very common for the women to be able to fight as well, and they would fight alongside the men. And it made sense for them to be able to defend themselves in that regard. So there's varying degrees, and even in today's society, there's, self-defense courses that you can take and stuff like that at least help you so you can be able to, defend yourself should the need arise. Which I very much approve of. And what ends up happening is Rebecca kind of like acquiesces, and she continues to, train and such like that with Thunder Soldier. Sometime after that, what ends up happening is, one of the things that ends up happening is, as this like trait that Rebecca develops, is that because she connects the fact that she had sent her mother to try to get her food, that Scarlett had left to try to get Rebecca food, Rebecca will hide the fact if she is hungry. She will hide that fact from the Thunder Soldier and from other people, because she doesn't want them to end up getting hurt, because she associates like, oh, I asked for food and then my mother died. So she kind of like, she's got like that twisted concept in her head that she thinks that, oh, if I'm hungry and if I let someone know, then something bad might happen to them. And that just becomes a habit where she will like hide the fact that she is hungry a lot of the time, which Kyros kind of tries to break her of, but it still kind of stays. And eventually what ends up happening is there is another moment where Rebecca is kidnapped, and that does lead her to being forced to, where she is captured by people who work for the Doflamingo family, for the Don Quixote family, and they realize that, oh, you're the lost princess. You're the daughter of Scarlet, who was the daughter of Riku. So you are technically a rightful princess to this kingdom. So Doflamingo figures out who she is, and then he puts her in the Cordia Coliseum. And that results in her having to become this fighter in the Coliseum. And Doflamingo has this deal with any of the fighters that if you can win a certain number of fights undefeated, then you will be allowed your freedom. I don't remember the exact number. I don't think it's 3,000 like what happens with Kuros, like what he managed to do. But I think it's like 100 or something. But because of how brutal so many of the fights are, it's very hard for anyone to get to that point. And, just for how strong and vicious so many of the other competitors are, it makes it very hard for someone to be able to succeed at that without having major bodily injury done to them. And so what ends up happening is, of course, Rebecca does, she's trapped in the Cordia Coliseum, and she ends up developing this title as the undefeated woman because, they don't hide her lineage. They make that as part of like watch the granddaughter of the man who's, betrayed his kingdom and everything like that, and, watch her fight in the Cordia Coliseum and everything like that. So their intention is to make the crowds boo at her and, root against her and everything like that as like a way of demoralizing her, but also helping to like, cement more of like Doflamingo is the rightful king at the moment, as opposed to this child who is, I don't know if they would say illegitimate heir, because it's like Rebecca and Scarlet and Kuros were married, but it's like Scarlet, gave up her right to the throne. And of course, during all of this time frame, Viola, who is undercover within the Doflamingo family, Don Quixote family, as one of the members, I mean, they know that she's the princess, but, she's there undercover to a degree. In order to protect her father and her niece, she, has been watching all of this, and we know that she's been watching as the Thunder Soldier has been taking care of Rebecca over the years, and how he helped train her and all of this other stuff, and how he kept her safe and happy and all of this. Which, Viola is very grateful for. She also is very upset when Rebecca ends up being, kept at the Cordia Coliseum, because one of the things that happens is, while she is there, Rebecca is given like the worst armor. She wears this exceedingly revealing armor that, shows off so much of her skin. So it's like any little nick or cut is going to be very, very visible on this, which, I mean, okay, I know that it's the way that Oda draws women, and the fact that it's even addressed in the storyline. I think it's Gats, who is the announcer, the MC for the Cordia Coliseum, along with his little assistant women and everything like that, that they make this comment about the fact that they give Rebecca the worst equipment. She has this worst set of armor, and she has a sword that's been dulled so much and is barely sharpened and everything like that. And as treatment, because it's she is being looked down upon, and they can't show her favoritism even if they wanted to, because that might tip the hand to Doflamingo that the country is aware of the fact that their king didn't actually go crazy, that their former king didn't actually go crazy. So Rebecca ends up getting stuck with the very skimpy armor and the very blunted sword and everything like that. And Rebecca develops this fighting style where she basically ends up dancing around the ring enough that she is able to eventually get her opponent to the point where she makes them attack right at the edge of the ring, and makes them, dodges at the right time, and makes them lose their balance and fall into the water, and that's how she wins. She has not actually struck an opponent, I believe, the entire time that she is there, barring once we get into the Marinomi competition, which I'll get to. So Rebecca spends the next however many years doing this, and she still has this connection. She still has this relationship with the Thunder Soldier because he still shows up and talks to her so much, and everything like that. And a good chunk of the gladiators that are housed within the Cordia Coliseum, they very much appreciate her because we see later on that she has like tended the wounds of so many of the different fighters who have lost appendages or limbs or gotten very badly injured. She helps, take care of their wounds, and tend to them and everything like that during that time frame. So it's like she has their support, and we see this even later on when we get to the tournament. There's, some other gladiators that like very much support her and everything like that, because most of them are like cheering for her during the tournament and everything. So there's like that connection there. And we know that the Thunder Soldier still comes and visits her and everything like that. But the other thing is that Rebecca is aware of the fact that Diamante is the one who killed her mother, and he is also the one that tends to run the Colosseum. So she has to interact with him at various points in time, and she has to continue to be brave during this time frame. One of the things is the only form of hockey that we've seen Rebecca exert at any point in time is the observation hockey, because there is a moment, and I'll get to it, where during the competition there is, Hakuba is going crazy and attacking everyone, and she manages to barely dodge it, where she's barely grazed by his attack, and that results in her being the winner of the block when it gets around to it. But we have not seen her demonstrate any form of armament hockey, and definitely have not seen her demonstrate any form of conqueror's hockey. I was trying to think, because like I know that I have like the whole video about like Vivi having conqueror's hockey, that I would fully buy that, but I don't think there's any members of the Riku family that would have conqueror's hockey. That's not necessary to be a king or a queen, obviously, given the number of kings and queens on this list that I have talked about that do not have conqueror's hockey at all. When I get to Big Mom, she obviously has conqueror's hockey, and when I get to stuff in Wano, Odin had conqueror's hockey, and Momonosuke may develop it at some point in time, but it's not obvious yet. So there's a lot with that, but I don't think I would ever see Rebecca developing conqueror's hockey. I can see her being able to be somewhat immune to it based on being able to be one of the people that could withstand conqueror's hockey up to a certain point, just because of her own willpower. And I would love it if she shows back up again later on in the story and like is helping with battling at some point in time. I would love it if she would have, at the very least, awakened her observation hockey more and has armament hockey. I also don't know if we ever see Kyros using armament hockey. That would be a nice thing to see them have it later on. But back into actual Rebecca's storyline. So over the years, she fights and fights and fights in the Colosseum, and eventually it gets to the point where it is time for this competition for the Marinomi. And we get to where, the storyline is starting and where the Straw Hats are coming in when it comes to the Dressrosa arc. So the morning before all of this is happening, Doflamingo makes this announcement to the country that they are going to have to pretend, that he has given up his role as the king of Dressrosa, and B, a Shishibukai. And they're like, no, Doflamingo, you can't do that. And they're just like, he's like, it's all pretend, so just everybody go about your business like it's normal, and all of that stuff. And, because that's part of his plan in regards to trying to trick Law. Which, I love you, Law, but you really shouldn't have fallen for that trick so easily. And eventually what ends up happening is, during that morning, the Thunder Soldier comes and visits Rebecca, because, he can make his way up to, the bars of the Colosseum, but he can't get inside. And Rebecca, will meet him at one of the windows, so that way they can talk in secret. And they're talking, and she explains that she is going to enter the contest for the Marinomi, so that way she can try to get her hands on it, and that might be useful for her to try to use against Doflamingo. And Kyros tries to convince her against it because he's like, there's going to be so many different strong competitors in this competition trying to get that devil fruit. And it's like, as much as he believes in her, he is aware of the fact that she is not strong enough to deal with all of them, because no offense, had it ended up being her versus Jesus Burgess, he would have easily wiped the floor with her. Very, very easily, along with several other characters in that regard. So what ends up happening is, of course, that kind of results in a fight between her and the Thunder Soldier, and he kind of, runs off. And Rebecca signs up for the competition, and later on, once it's kind of, getting warmed up for the competition and everything like that, and she's roaming around inside of the Coliseum and everything like that, she ends up coming across Luffy, and under the alias of Lucy. And as he's, looking around at everything, he sees, the Kiro statue, so he's kind of amazed by that. And she's kind of she's the one that tells him about the statue. And she's kind of intrigued by him a little bit, because of course he's dressed like this old man with a beard and a long beard and mustache, and dressed in a Hawaiian shirt and everything like that, just being very kind of carefree about everything. So there's that whole bit there. But as she's watching him and talking with him, they kind of get along a little bit, and she tells him the legacy of the statue and everything, which is kind of this only remnant of Kyros that is left, because it's okay, you can turn Kyros into a toy and wipe his physical memory from everybody, but there's literally this statue standing there that carries this legacy with it there, and you can't really get rid of it. Also, they wouldn't know to get rid of it because they've just forgotten about who Kyros is anyway, so it's this legend that has persisted. And she tells him this story and everything like that, and Luffy thinks that that's pretty cool. There ends up being two fighters tease her about something that someone else was eliminated from the competition or whatever. And then when it's Luffy's turn to fight, she kind of helps him find armor and everything like that. While all this is going on, there's Cavendish in the background and Bartolomeo in the background, and all this other stuff going on, which is just really funny having to deal with. But eventually it's Luffy's turn to fight, and Rebecca watches as he fights, and as he wins his block, defeats, fights against Chin Chow and fights against all this other stuff. And so there's so much of that is happening. And then it ends up getting to the point where after Luffy's fight, he comes back in, and she's like, yeah, you were really good or whatever. And she's like, how about I buy you lunch? And he's like, oh, okay. And she buys him lunch from the, little food cart thing that's inside of the Coliseum, and, takes him to an area where they can eat. And her intention is, she's seen how strong he is, and she's like, if I'm going to find a way to try to win this competition, he might be a problem in regards to that, because he's really strong. And her intention is to take him into, kind of the more back area of the Coliseum and distract him with food, and then grab him, and then, kind of come up behind him and try to at the very least knock him out so he can't keep fighting. She doesn't want to kill him, but she at least wants to incapacitate him enough where he can't fight. So he's eliminated, so that way that's one less competitor that she has to deal with. And it's not done with malice or anything like that. It's just she has to do this to try to find a way to be able to get to the Mera no Mi, so she can try to use it to fight against Doflamingo. That's her whole desire, is to get the Mera no Mi so she herself can eat it and then use that power against Doflamingo. Bear in mind, I don't think Rebecca would have exceedingly rotten luck with trying to control it right away. She just doesn't have a huge amount of fighting experience when it comes to that type of a thing. Whereas you have Saba, who is the one that ends up with it, obviously. Well, he never actually saw Ace use it in real life or in person. He, given the number of Devil Fruit users that are part of the Revolutionary Army, he probably would be able to discuss with them, how that would work, or probably ask them different questions. Like Karasu is a Logia, so he would be able to ask Karasu questions about, how does it feel when you become a Logia? How does it feel when you use your power? So Sabo, we kind of have that kind of information as like just this base understanding. But back to Rebecca. Sorry, there's a lot of tangents in this. But what ends up happening is Rebecca, she tries to attack Luffy, and he just kind of like, nope. And, just kind of like pins him down, and, or he just literally pins her down, and, just like sits on her while he's eating his lunch. And, while this is happening, so she's pinned, and Luffy is just sitting there eating his lunch, sitting on top of her. And the other gladiators who are like in the back area, who are these like injured gladiators, are like kind of jeering at Luffy about this, and saying, oh, blah, 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 don't hurt Rebecca, type of a thing. And the thing is that of course at this point in time, Luffy has enough observation hockey to be able to tell that Rebecca wasn't trying to attack him in malice, which is different, because it's like if she had been trying to attack him in, with malice in her, as in like, oh, I want to kill you or something like that, then, he would have been much harsher with her in regards to, fighting her and pinning her down and everything like that. But that's not the case. He doesn't sense any malicious intent from her, but she also just literally bought him lunch. And Luffy is a sucker for anyone who will buy him lunch. Buy him or make him lunch, as is very evident for several arcs. And of course that results in, she kind of ends up explaining a little bit more about what's going on. I don't remember if she reveals the fact that she's the princess to him or anything like that. Not that Luffy would care. But they end up talking, and, he ends up seeing the way that she interacts with the other gladiators that have been injured and everything like that. And she explains to him, I'm sorry I tried to attack you, but I just thought if I could eliminate another person that was in this competition that already proved to be strong, that would be one less strong opponent that I would have to deal with in the final round if I get past my block. And he's like, oh. And he's not mad at her about it, because Luffy, of course, it's very difficult to make Luffy mad. But it's also like, she bought him food, and she wasn't trying to attack him with malice, and then she told him why and everything like that. So there's, different reasons there for why he's being much more willing to not want to fight her, and why he's willing to listen to her. So eventually this leads to where it is time for Rebecca to fight in Block D. And she goes out, and, Luffy is like watching her on the monitor, where the rest of the gladiators are watching her as well. And so in Block D, she's, running around fighting different people. Well, she's like tricking them into falling off the side of the outside of the ring. Because if you fall off the outside of the ring, then you're automatically eliminated anyway. And then you have to try not to get eaten by like the bullfish that are in the the fighting fish that are in the water. So she's, dashing about and doing that type of stuff. And one of the things that kind of blows people's minds to a little bit is like, and as this is happening, the crowd is booing at her and, saying insults to her and everything like that. There's also a moment where, like, earlier she had interacted with Ricky, who is actually, of course, Riku in disguise. And they had that interaction. She does not know that that's him. So they have that interaction earlier on. But, so she's going through and fighting against all these different people. But she is also actually kind of attacking at this point in time, which is kind of, kind of befuddling to people, because Rebecca doesn't usually attack. She usually just like dances around until she's able to get the person to fall into the water, which is, I think, referred to as like her water dance style or something like that. And one of the things that happens is, of course, as the crowd is booing her, Cavendish actually comes over and ends up yelling at the whole arena that it is shameful in regarding to, want someone dead while not running to risk your own lives to do it in that regard. So he's like yelling at them for being, this is shameful of you to boo at her or whatever like that for like no reason type of a thing. And of course, during all of these fights and everything like that, he's like, he sympathizes with her, but he also reminds her that they are enemies, which, she understands. But I don't think, barring when Hakuba comes out, I don't think that Cavendish, unless it was down to like Rebecca and Cavendish as like the last two fighters, I don't think he would have tried to attack her directly in that regard. And of course, they end up being allies later. But during this time frame, she ends up having to fight against Rolling Logan, who's just another huge competitor who like knows who she is, and ends up fighting against her, and he ends up almost taking her out, but she is saved by the fact that she actually ends up able to like avoid his attacks eventually, and kind of takes him out. And then she ends up kind of having this like little alliance with this other gladiator, who is one of the gladiators that has been in the Colosseum for a while, Acelia, who is this female gladiator, and they kind of work together and everything like that to try to reach the finals. And Acelia is actually in support of Rebecca, because she's seen the way Rebecca is and probably been around Rebecca a lot in the Colosseum. So they end up fighting alongside each other, and then later on Rebecca ends up having to fight against Sureiman, who is of course Sureiman the beheader that ends up joining Cavendish's crew later on. After everything happens, so they kind of fight against each other. And he asked her how could she cope with living in a country that despises her so much, and she declares that it does not matter how much she is hated as long as she can live with the Thunder Soldier, because her intention is, of course, Rebecca's dream is that she wants to be able to become free again, so that way she can actually go and live with the Thunder Soldier, because he is like the closest thing to family that she has at that point in time. So she goes through all of that, and that's her intention. Eventually, she is able to get to the point where she survives long enough to where Cavendish kind of ends up falling asleep because his narcolepsy kicks in. He falls asleep, which brings out Hakuba. Hakuba then literally attacks everybody else who's in the ring who is still standing, which takes out Sureiman and a whole bunch of others. And Rebecca actually is able to, this is a moment where her like observation hockey kicks in just enough that she is able to barely dodge the attack just enough where it grazes her helmet, but she does get knocked down, but she's not knocked out, and everybody else is knocked out. And then Cavendish faints again because he falls asleep again after Hakuba's finished. And at that point in time, Rebecca ends up being the only one that's able to stand up, and she is declared the winner of the block. And the crowd is just booing about this, and this is the moment where they have it that Gats explains to his like little secretary assistant ladies that are just like, oh yeah, we give her like she couldn't have cheated. She has this armor that literally shows you if she gets hit at all, and she has a sword that has been blunted so much, or that is barely ever sharpened, and we give her the worst equipment. So it's like she won that fair and square. She is the last one standing. She's the one that managed to survive this onslaught by Hakuba. So that's how kind of where that leads into everything, and she goes back into the arena area where she is she's greeted by Luffy and everything like that. And at that point in time, she notices that there's something different about him, and she's puzzled by this different person, which is this takes place after Luffy and Sabo have swapped. So Sabo is now dressed as Lucy, and Luffy is out running around trying to help Zoro and Kinemon and all of that stuff with figuring out what's going on with fighting against Doflamingo and all of that stuff. So inside the arena, she's like, okay, something's different here. You're not the Lucy that I was talking to earlier. And he ends up, and then it gets to the point in the finals, and I don't remember if it's stated that like Luffy asked Sabo to like look out for Rebecca because like Rebecca was kind of had been being nice to Luffy and everything like that. And I don't remember if Luffy asked Sabo to keep an eye on her during the finals or whatever. But I think Sabo probably noticed that there was like this connection between Luffy and Luffy and Rebecca and, took him up on that, or, decided to keep an eye on her anyway. Also, given everything that's stated over the loudspeaker about Rebecca, he would be able to figure out very quickly that, oh yeah, no, she's the granddaughter of the former king of this island, the true ruler of this island, Riku. So I should probably keep an eye on her anyway. So it leads to the final bout that is between Lucy, Sabo, Bartolomeo, Jesus Burgess, Diamante, and Rebecca. And what ends up happening is, of course, during this whole moment, they have the treasure chest that has the Marimaro no Mi in it, tied to the back of one of the fighting fish, and you have to get to that, and then, of course, they're all fighting against each other and everything like that, and Sabo's fighting, as Lucy and everything like that, to, as this distraction and everything like that. And Rebecca actually ends up, during this time frame, takes up the opportunity to try to attack Diamante, because of course he's the one that killed her mother all those years ago. And she's also very impressed when Lucy, Sabo, shatters Jesus Burgess's armor to show off that power and everything like that. It's also a way of showing to the audience that Sabo's pretty dang strong himself. So we're getting that. And so Rebecca tries to fight against Diamante, but she's really no match for him by any degree, unfortunately. And he ends up taunting her, saying that as much as she's willing to fight, she's not willing to kill. And then he mocks her about his mother's death and everything like that. So at this point in time, I think is actually when he's the one that reveals that he's the one that killed her mother. And of course, Rebecca just breaks down in tears by this. And during this whole time frame, during this fight, is when Luffy and Kyros and Scarlet have made their way into the castle, and where to go and try to attack Doflamingo, and of course where Robin and Usopp have made their way into the under area, where Usopp manages to get Sugar to pass out, which causes, of course, Sugar's curse to break all over the island at the same time because she's knocked out. And that results in anyone who was a toy being returned to their human forms, or their animal forms. In the cases of the ones that were animals that were turned into toys, they'll change back to their real, true forms, and everyone's memories of them come flooding back. So, for Rebecca, this means that all of those memories that she had where she thought that it was just her and her mother, she has all those memories of her father flooding back into her mind. And she's just, it's that, and I cannot imagine how this would be. This would be, I'm 30 something, gonna be 32 this year, and it's like if I had my dad erased from my memory, it would just be and then it all just comes flooding back for the majority of my life, and it's just like that would just make you end up yes, Rebecca breaks down and starts crying, as we see lots of other people throughout the kingdom doing the same thing. They're breaking down and crying because they're remembering their loved ones again that were taken from them. Or in the case, their loved ones or their comrades or something like that, where they were taken from them. And it all just comes flooding back. And, Rebecca is just breaking down in the middle of this fight, and Sabo kind of has to protect her while all of this is going on. Sabo and Bartolomeo are kind of protecting her while all of this is going on. And Sabo ends up, of course, managing to get to where the treasure chest is, gets it open, and gets out the devil fruit, and he eats the Marimaro no Mi, which of course gives him all of the powers that Ace had and allows him to kind of create his own ones. After that, of course, that results in him, just destroying the arena and exposing the underground and everything like that. And of course, she is just very amazed by all of this as this is happening right in front of her. He also has her looped under his arm to hold her and keep her safe, so she's not in the range of fire. He does not care to a degree that Bartolomeo is in the range of the attack, but Bartolomeo is able to protect himself, so that's fine. And what ends up happening after that is, of course, they end up landing in the underground area where they are reunited with, where Sabo, reveals his identity as Sabo of the Revolutionary Army, and we meet Hack and, Koala and everything like that, and we see Robin and Usopp are down there, and, so Rebecca is kind of getting introduced to all of them. And then we get to the point where, of course, Doflamingo sets up his birdcage game, and, of course, Rebecca is one of the ones that is worth, I think, like, 1 star or 2 stars, whichever one it is. She's not a very high priority for him, but she's like one of the ones that is, wanted by him, which is fair. And of course, this leads to where, they're running around the island, and of course, she's working alongside the Straw Hats and Sabo and, Koala and Hack and everything like that. And she ends up getting like paired up with like Robin and Bartolomeo because I think they need to get Law's key for the handcuffs to Luffy and Law so they can unhook Law's handcuffs. So they end up having to fly on with these like rhinoceros beetles or whatever they are that will help with like carrying them over the kingdom. So we have like this sequence where like they're kind of like flying over the kingdom to a degree, which is just kind of funny. And like, so we have that little moment there. And really the next big thing that happens is, yes, they're able to help get Luffy the keys and everything like that. But the next big moment for Rebecca is, of course, when she gets to the sunflower field and where her mother's grave was. And, of course, this is where Diamante has shown up. And she confronts him there because, of course, he knows that that's where Scarlet's grave is. And that's, of course, where Rebecca goes and everything like that. And she does try to attack him. Of course, Kiro shows up during this time frame and ends up, of course, is the main one that ends up fighting against Diamante, while Robin actually kind of protects Rebecca. And she ends up, this is where Robin ends up using her, Grand Fleur, Moss Fleur, whatever it is, to like pick up all of the sunflowers and try to use them as like a defensive thing to protect Rebecca, which of course isn't really much of a defense against like the attacks that Diamante has raining down on them with like all of the steel little mace balls that are like falling from the sky. And of course that causes Robin to get hurt, but like Rebecca is kept safe. And of course Rebecca watches as her father fights Diamante and defeats him. And, that's all taken care of. And so, Diamante gets defeated by Kiros, which is a very cathartic moment, and when he falls, his head lands smack. Sorry, baby girl. I not mean to scare you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You're okay. I love you. We can snuggle a whole bunch when this is done. Good. Why can't we do it now? But so Rebecca, Diamante's head lands smack on Scarlet's grave, and hopefully that results in him at the very least having a broken neck and being paralyzed for the rest of his life, if not dead. But we'll see what happens there. And of course, this finally leads to Rebecca can finally see her father and talk with her father, and they end up, they're right at, Scarlet's grave, so it's been like 10 years since the last time they were all there together, and now it's like them actually able to be at the grave as father and daughter. And they put, Rebecca puts flowers at the grave and everything like that, and they kind of end up talking. Unfortunately, during this time frame is, of course, when the, the birdcage is, of course, closing in around the kingdom, so they need to go and try to deal with that. And eventually what ends up happening is as Rebecca is running around, she ends up coming across where Viola is trying to fight against Doflamingo. And, she ends up, and what ends up happening is, of course, Doflamingo recognizes Rebecca, grabs her, has Viola, kind of pinned, and he uses his parasite thread on Rebecca to try to get Rebecca to, force Rebecca to attack her own aunt, which of course would have worked had, Law not been in the area and Luffy not managed to wake up, out of his, or get his strength back at the right moment. But of course, we have this very emotional moment, as I went over in Viola's video, where Rebecca is like being forced to run at Viola full speed with her sword ready to attack, and Rebecca is just crying and bawling, which I don't blame her, and nobody blames her for this. And Viola is just like, just close your eyes, Rebecca. It's okay. Just, you didn't do anything. This isn't your fault. None of this is your fault. You're okay. You're still innocent. You're not the one that's actually hurting me, and everything like that. And of course, at the last second is, of course, Law activates Room and swaps Luffy for Viola. So Rebecca's attack does hit, but it hits Luffy, and he has his forehead hockeyed up, so it just breaks the sword, and that so Viola is out of there, and then Law switches out Rebecca with like a piece of rock or something like that and bumps her back to where he is with Viola. And so that cuts any strings that Doflamingo had trying to control them. And of course Luffy is now then fighting Doflamingo, and of course Luffy continues his onslaught, and eventually he is able to defeat Doflamingo and break the bird cage and release everyone, so that way they're not A, being affected by the parasite thread anymore, B, the bird cage isn't closing in anymore, and that's taken care of. After that, Luffy ends up Law saves Luffy from this fall, and then he ends up Luffy basically ends up resting with his Rebecca crying while she has Luffy next to him, and he's I think he's just knocked out or whatever. But Rebecca is also just crying because it's relief. It's Doflamingo is defeated and the country is free and everything like that. So all of that stuff happens. Later that night at the castle, she can't find Luffy and his crew, so she finds out, she talks to Riku, who of course at this point in time has been, fully revealed for her to know that that's her grandfather and everything like that. And he ends up talking with her, and he's like, will you become the Princess of Dressrosa once he becomes king again? And initially, Rebecca agrees with it. And what ends up happening is later on, 3 days later, Rebecca is, hears her maids talking about the fact that there's a rumor going around that your father was actually a nobleman from another country, and that's why and that he has died, so that's why that blah 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 reasons. And it's this rumor that Kyros is the one that spread, so that way it would try to make Rebecca seem much more eligible to be able to be the princess, and and everything like that. And they're trying to get Rebecca dressed all nice so she's ready for when Riku ascends to the throne again, so that way he can become king again, and then Rebecca can claim her right as high princess, or as crown princess. And from there, what ends up happening is Viola tells her that Luffy has showed up, that he's made his way through the Marines, and he has shown up at the palace. Rebecca is dismayed by this, and she's dismayed that she hasn't managed to express her gratitude to Luffy for everything that he's done. But what ends up happening is Luffy shows up at the palace, and he calls out to Rebecca, because of course he's now aware of the fact that Kyros is Rebecca's father, and blah 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 blah, and all of that stuff. And he ends up asking her if she's okay with Kyros leaving, and she says no. So Luffy ends up getting her out of the castle and running off with her. But first, Rebecca goes to Viola and asks her to take her place as the next in line for the throne, which of course Viola completely agrees to, because she already agreed to that with Scarlet, 16 years ago and everything like that. So Scarlet could go be with Kyros, and now it's so Rebecca can go and be with Kyros. And Luffy is racing through the town with Rebecca holding on to him and everything like that, and racing by the Marines and all of that stuff. And it's just no, Luffy kidnapped our princess and everything else. And so it's just all the people are chasing after them. And Luffy gets Rebecca to the flower fields and sends her to where Kyros' house is. And of course she arrives there just before Kyros is about to leave, and he ends up being but I'm not worthy of this. I'm not worthy to be your father. I want you to have this life that you should have. And she's like, I don't care about that. I want to be with you. I want to stay with you. I don't care about being a princess. I want to stay with my father. And then, of course, that he agrees, and of course she hugs him. And that's just one of my favorite moments in all of Dressrosa, is like where Rebecca finally gets to hug Kyros. And they're both just so happy, and they watch as Luffy and the allies are escaping and everything like that. And she finally gets to have her dream where she gets to hold hands with the Thunder Soldier the way she's always wanted to, and they can actually live together. And everything like that, just like they wanted to. Later on, we of course see her going shopping, where she has like Moshiri with her, because now the Tontadas are much more of an open thing. Not too much else. We're almost finished. This ended up being longer than I wanted it to be. Sorry. Later on, when we get to the Reverie, of course, or during the Zoe arc, we have it that Viola asked Rebecca to accompany them with the Riku family as Viola's lady-in-waiting, which of course Rebecca easily agrees to. Kyros is going to go as well. Later on, during the stories of the self-proclaimed Straw Hat Grand Fleet, we see Rebecca and Viola showing Leo and the Tontadas their new ship and their new clothes and everything like that, for them being pirates. And then when we get to the Reverie arc, we of course have it that on their way there, they end up, their ship ends up getting, kind of targeted by pirates trying to kidnap Rebecca and Viola, which of course doesn't really go very well. But it's also, we see Rebecca being very happy about like reading about Luffy's exploits in Totland and being happy about that. And she keeps calling him Lucy and all of that, because that's just, that's what she calls him, because that's what his fake name was and everything like that. And of course they end up getting the plans to try to kidnap Rebecca and Viola are thwarted by Kobe, which results in Rebecca meeting Kobe. And I know a lot of people really liked Rebecca and Kobe together as a possible couple. I still kind of like it too, but I also like Kobe and Hibari, so there's that there as well. So we have like that connection there. And then of course when they get to the Reverie, where they're all the way up in Marijuana and everything like that, we see them all interacting with each other, with all these different royals interacting with each other. And it's Rebecca ends up interacting with Vivi and Shirahoshi and everything like that, because of course it's like they end up revealing that they all know Luffy, and that Luffy has like helped save all of their kingdoms and all of that stuff. So we have like that connection there that's forming there. And of course Rebecca tries to protect Shirahoshi when Charlo shows up, and tries to take Shirahoshi and force her to become a slave and everything like that. Rebecca gets very angry about that and is having to be held back by Sai. We also have, after, Charlos is dealt with by Melzigard, that Shirahoshi, or that Rebecca watches as Moshiri is able to heal Shirahoshi of like her wounds and everything like that, her bruises and everything. She makes how the largest princess in the world is meeting the smallest princess in the world, which is just kind of cute. And then later on, which we finally get this during the flashback to what else happened during Reverie, is Rebecca and Leo were present. I was going to say Lilo, but that's wrong. Leo were present, of course, when Charlos showed back up again and tried to capture Shirahoshi again, and she roots on his side, and Leo like attacked Charlos. Given that we haven't heard anything else about Rebecca and her family, I'm hoping that the Dressrosa, group managed to get back to Dressrosa safely, since we haven't heard anything else about that. That may not be as big of news as what's going on with like, everything that happened with like Vivi and Cobra and everything like that. But I would like to hope that they are at least safe back in Dressrosa. And of course, as I said, I would love it if later on, if there ends up being something where either, because like Rebecca and Vivi are friends at this point in time, that like maybe Rebecca is like, we have to try to find a way to help Vivi, or we have to try to do something to help with, what's going on. And, and Luffy's our friend too, and, somehow like this alliance between Luffy and, Vivi is like revealed to the world, and that would, make things even better and all of this stuff. So that would like just result in some connections, more connections being made much more obvious there. And as I said, I would love it if it's either like the Dressrosa army being led by like Kyros and Rebecca show up at like either like the final battle, not on Laugh Tale, but like maybe something against the Marines working with the Revolutionary Army, because she knows Sabo and Koala and Hack, and she would be able to have this connection to them there, that she would be able to like distinguish that like Sabo wouldn't try to kill Cobra. He doesn't seem like that would be something he would try to do. It has to be fake. And like Rebecca and Viola, given their interactions with Sabo at Dressrosa, would probably be able to determine that no, I don't think Sabo would do that. So there's like those connections there that I think would be really good. Also, I made my comment about like in the Viola video that like since Viola has her powers, maybe she saw some stuff at Marijois that she wasn't supposed to see. And maybe she tells that once they're back in Dressrosa, or once they're on like a safe place, she ends up telling, you know, Rebecca and her father and Kyros what she saw on Marijois. So maybe there's something there. But yeah, I would love it if like Rebecca showed back up again and maybe she's managed to get a little more fighting skills. Maybe she still uses like her water dance technique where she like tricks her opponents into like kind of, you know, knocking themselves out or whatever, so she's not physically harming them. But maybe she has decided that like, okay, there is a difference between physically fighting against someone to protect something and just, you know, hurting someone in cold blood. So hopefully she's kind of be able to figure that out. So that's what I have here for Rebecca. Sorry that took longer than I had anticipated it being, but that's what we have here. I thank you for watching. The next one for these should be going into the Tontada stuff, and that might all just be one video with the Tontadas and Moshiri and her father, or it might be like 2 or 3 different videos. I'm not sure yet. It depends on stuff. So that's what I have. I thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye!